You're listening to Becoming CEO, where we share our journeys as solo founders to becoming the CEO of seven-figure businesses.
And these are our behind-the-scenes conversations as we figure it out. And these are things that most people just aren't sharing.
What are you going to do with all your newfound free time?
Create tons more stuff and train my people. And have happy mornings.
Sounds like a lot of work. You're just going to replace the old work with new work. That's what it sounds like.
Fun work.
All right. So tell us the backstory. What led us here?
Yeah. So kind of like going into, it was like maybe second week of December. Was having a conversation with a buddy of mine who was a former client. He was talking about how his like operations manager, his number two, was like doing all this stuff for him. I'm like, man, like I just wish I could like get more stuff off my plate. And he goes, oh, here's what I did. I made a don't want list. And then I gave that to my number two and said, figure out how to get all this stuff off my list, come back with a plan and tell me how you're going to make this happen. He's like, I don't care if all of it doesn't happen like right away, but like show me a plan as to how I get myself out of these things that I don't want to do. And so I was like, that's amazing. And so I made this list, which fundamentally is the don't want list, but it kind of, I branded it as, not branded it because it's not my brand, but a former mentor of mine called it the drainers versus the drivers. So it's like the don't want versus the want. What are the things that you want to be spending your time on that give you energy, that you don't mind doing in the business? And then what are the things that drain you that make you like not stoked? And so I made this list. And as you can imagine, or as one would imagine, the list of don't wants is way longer than the list of wants. And I spent like probably like a good week and a half just like adding to the list, like a good 90-minute session. I got a lot of it out. And then over the course of like another week or so, I like refined the list to get like more specific and even realized that there were some like categories of things. And then handed that to Lisa, my number two. And she kind of came back and was like, hey, by end of Jan, I think I can have you out of 50% of this list. By end of Q1, like 90%. Here's how I propose to do that. And so she started kind of putting some of these things in place. And it's working really well so far. And I have, like, when I look at my calendar, I'm in less meetings. We're in back and forth Slack way less. I'm getting pulled into things so far a lot less. And also part of this was they took me out of a bunch of Slack channels where they found that I was actually getting in the way because I would see something that I didn't need to see. And so they just like, part of it was just removing me from a good portion of Slack channels. And then we redefined how we use like a key piece of it was like kind of communication based. And so we redefined how we use some of these tools and for what purpose and when, and like what someone should expect of another based on how and what platform we've used to communicate. And a lot of the noise, if you will, like the back and forth, even sorting through conversations that kind of went too long and they were all happening in Slack, like that led to I can't find that thing when you said the other day that like, which then pulled the other person out. So that was it. So, I mean, I could give you a list of, I can read off some of the things that are on my don't want list if you'd like, but
yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah. So, on my don't want list, any meetings before noon or 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, preferably. I don't want to have to check Slack or Notion more than 2 times per day. I hate long back and forth Slack convos. I want short and sweet bulleted communications sent to me with specific questions and pre-thought out solutions. I am not on the coaching team or need to attend any client success meetings anymore. I'm not responsible for saving clients that may want to leave early. I don't want to hear about specific clients not paying, not renewing, being a bad client, who asked for a refund or anything like that. That should be owned by somebody else. I'm not responsible for weekly coaching. And there's like a minutia to that. I'm not responsible or sending specific links to trainings inside of our platform to a client. I'll just tell someone to send those links. Any customer support issues, any technical questions, updating or creating metrics or any dashboard of any kind, building automations. And some of these I wasn't doing, but like I was just further cementing that I want no business in ever getting pulled back into it. Being involved in solving problems, technical or people. I don't want to be the person that solves anything except for serving my management team via weekly one-on-ones. I don't want people to bring me problems because a lot of people were bringing me like, hey, like, what should I do here? I shouldn't be solving an ops problem or a client success problem for a team member or any of those departments. I shouldn't be the one identifying problems. Like, I can find problems, but I don't want to be the one to come up with a solution. Like if I happen to see something, I don't want to be on a ton of meetings, especially ones that run long and involve us doing things that didn't require a meeting. Meetings must have an agenda. I don't want to be responsible for hiring or firing or any sort of disciplinary meeting, sales call reviews, working on vacations, working on the weekend, anything finance related, talking to accountants, just send me the damn P&L. Then I said, I don't want to, co-pilot duties on live training calls. Someone else should be reading. Someone else should be on my calls, taking notes, doing all that stuff to follow up later. I don't want to be writing or designing sales pages, video editing or publishing social media, scheduling or rescheduling meetings, responding/managing email. I'd love to only have to look at email one time per day, a few times per week. And then sales chat triage was the end of that list.
A reminder of that famous quote from Office Space. Have you seen that movie, Office Space?
Yeah.
So good. What is it, would you say, you actually do around here, Greg?
Yeah. So here's the want list, which is a lot shorter. Create and deliver training to our clients. Live delivery of said training, whether that's virtual or in person. Writing, creating content for marketing and or internal. Coming up with marketing ideas, coming up with training ideas, interviewing smart people. I'm going to do a couple of power days this year. I want to do like 1 to 2 per quarter, which is like I have my first client coming here in February for like a whole day for like a high fee. Creating more products and then collaborating with smart, creative people to create cool things. That's my want list. And yeah, so of that don't list, I mentioned like most of it's off my plate. So like I'm not on the client success meeting anymore. I am out of most of these channels where I was getting pulled into a lot of these things that I didn't want to deal with. Slack is not on my phone, which is amazing. I'm still involved in hiring and firing and disciplinary stuff, sales call reviews, because I'm still manager of that. So there's a few things that are still on there, but I can tell you, I actually, not that we're hiring and firing people all the time, but like even though some of the things that I'm still doing on that list, I don't mind them nearly as much with all of the other stuff off the list.
I have anxiety just hearing this.
Why?
I think I don't know. It's not a good thing, but I have a really high need of being in the know. I love meetings. I'm all for meetings. I'll take more meetings within reasonable limits. Like, I guess bear in mind, I am not extremely taxed right now on my calendar. Right. So meetings don't bother me. I like the engagement. I like the interaction with the team. I like the camaraderie. I like the thought partnership that takes place. I like a busy Slack workspace. I like a lot of activity.
Oh, yeah,
I like to see what's going on, right? Like if there's not a lot of Slack notifications, in a day, I start to get a little bit anxious. Like, what's going on here, right? Like, what is anything happening, right? Um, so it's interesting because I think I've gotten a lot of the stuff that I didn't want on my plate off my plate already,
Mm-hmm.
and so I do have free time, but maybe not to the extent that you're going to have it now. As I listen to your list,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if it was me, and I think it is. I think this is me to a certain extent. If I'm being honest with you, there would be an element of, what do I do now?
I have so much
Like,
to do. I mean, I have so much to do that I'm like, so kind of one of the, I don't want to say like in that December when I started making this list, one of the big takeaways that I had was, and I'm not sure if some of this was the cause, but I think some of it was like being inside, like the Slack activity, all that stuff is, it was just so easy for me to come in and save the day or answer that question because I'm on and working, like I'm around and checking these things way more than anybody else is because it's my business. And so I found myself inserting myself back in, which just has continued to make more people dependent upon me. And I know that if I want to achieve the goals that we have this year, the team needs to step up. And because I was always answering questions, I was never teaching them how to be more self-sufficient or training them. I'm really good at like, um, one of my mentors said, why don't you coach your team like you coach your clients? And I was like, duh. And I had no bandwidth to do that because I was always in there in the trenches fighting. And so now, like, for example, just before this call, we had, shocking, and I hate to say this, our first call where I was training our client success team on a specific thing that I want them doing. And once a month, I'm going to train them on a key piece of our IP, things like that, and start like helping them grow as individuals inside of our team so that I'm not the one responsible for it. And so all of these other little things just kept me from, Dan Martell says, you build the people and the people build the business. I was just too in the weeds to ever build the people. And thus I was still inside. And so, part of it, like now with this free time, like I spent, probably a good 3 to 4 hours prepping for this meeting and put together an SOP and a worksheet. And I took them through, here's how to do this thing. Here's how we apply it. Like, we should all be doing it this way. And people were like, hell yeah. And then like we brainstormed of like what other things they would love to learn from me. And now I have a running list of like the next 6 months of training is like, I know what I got to do. And some of this is going to take work. Like, and it's going to force me to think about what I want, the clarity, the vision, so that again I can like lead them. And so I made a comment back like I have a lot more time, not only to create but just to freaking think. Like I did not have enough time to do that. Like I was always throwing shit together last minute, and it wasn't well thought out. And so like it didn't land. Like what was the context? Like I didn't have the ability to deliver any of that. And so I don't think it stuck. And so now I get to like, think twice, ask once, right? Like versus perpetuating this narrative and conversation that, why are we having this conversation? I have no idea because I didn't even think about why I was really asking this question. And everyone else is doing it too. So now I get to like kind of watch from above and be like, oh yeah, like here's why we're so freaking inefficient. Like you asked 4 questions in one question and you led with an open-ended question. So you didn't get the real answer that you really wanted and it turned into an argument and you guys are all now frustrated with each other. Like you just asked a shitty question. Ask a better question next time. you know?
So I'm curious about a few things. Number
Yeah.
one, why do you think you didn't do this sooner?
It's a good question. I'd say my calendar wasn't designed in a way that gave me enough of this time. And I constantly was getting involved in the time that I had available where I should have probably been doing this sort of stuff, which I will still say I don't think I had enough available, like dedicated don't interrupt Greg time. I was not utilizing effectively because Slack would be open and I'd see the question come in and I'd answer it to try to help someone. Like I was still too involved in certain things because I was just exposed to it. And so, I had 90 minutes to go produce 4 videos or whatever, as a dumb example, a marketing example. And I didn't even script any of them and I didn't record any of them at the end of 90 minutes. And it's like, when I'm prepared for that session, I can usually knock out 6 YouTube videos in 90 minutes. And it's like, but it would have required preparation that I didn't, destroy by being pulled into all these little things. So I think part of it is that. And then I think the other one is just, I don't know. I think December was a big like, hey, things got to change this year and it's got to start with me. And I need to get my team to do more stuff for me and take on more. And that means giving them more and weaponizing them. And I wasn't doing that. And so kind of maybe just honoring it, starting to honor it.
What was it that you feel needs to change this year that sparked the let's double down on team and development and training?
Well, when I saw this don't list, there's a lot of things that we need people to be able to do on this list that they may or may not know how to do yet or feel empowered to do.
So building the list itself was an eye opener. When you looked at the list, you were like,
100%. 100%. Not only was it an eye opener of too much of this is inside my head, but it was also, oh man, there's a lot of this that I could probably get out of right now if we just decide it to be so, and that's like the letting go piece. I think that I think maybe I kind of had more of an open mind to. I just was like, you're in these conversations with people that are ahead of you and you're like, I just started hearing enough times about how much they're like, oh, this person's just doing that for me. I'm like, what? They're doing that for you? How'd you get them to do that? And they're like, well, I just stopped answering their questions. I'm like, oh, brilliant. It's like, that's a great question. I don't know. So now the response is, that's a great question. You should probably go figure out an answer to that. Even if I know the answer, it's like, I got to train myself to, great question. You should go ask this other person, or you should go post that in this community that we're in that has, other mentors in there, or, that'd be a great conversation for you to take to the other person on the team. And you guys should come back with an idea. I might have my own idea already, but then that I would just be solving their problem. So I'm still working on that piece, but little things like that have been like, hey, how would you do this? I don't know. How would you? even if I did know.
Did you get any pushback from your team? Subtle or not so subtle?
Not a single. They were like, thank you. Finally. All of them. All of them. It was very well. They looked at me when I shared all of this, at our annual team meeting, this is what's going to happen. This is we're moving Greg out of a lot of these key areas, which means leveling each of you guys up. And they're like, you're now just realizing that we need to do all this? Finally, welcome to the freaking world, Greg. So yeah, it was very well received.
and so I'm conscious of people that are listening to this that may not be in the position that you and I are in yet, where we have teams of people that could take on some of this work. What would you say to somebody who is, maybe, low 6 figures, mid 6 figures, not yet have the kind of, the team built required to support this kind of exercise? Is there a step that they can take in the right direction?
Yeah, I got 3 things. I'd say the first is, and because I see our clients in this situation because we shared a lot of this stuff that we're doing with our clients. The first thing is that you're probably already doing too much, like you're trying to do too many things that are out of sequence that are leading to you feeling, tied to all these things, that it's like sometimes it's business models, sometimes like you're just mimicking someone that's 5 steps ahead of you and like you're 5 steps behind them. And it's like, they weren't doing it that way, like operating at, like in a different season. So I think it's like identifying, are you trying to do too much for where you're at right now? And if so, then what of that can you kill and eliminate or postpone or hold off on? That'll probably clean up a bunch. The second thing is, I mean, dependent upon when you watch this, we're recording this January of 19th of 2023. Dan Martell just released his book called Buy Back Your Time. Phenomenal book. You should check it out. He did a 90-minute masterclass for our clients in December, kind of breaking down the principles. The book just came out 2 days ago. One of them is called Determine Your Buyback Rate. And it's, everyone should do this. It's take your revenue or your income for the year, divide it by 2,000, because that's how many working hours most people in the United States, Canada work, including holidays and vacations, and then divide
If you're
that
in Europe,
by
it's
4.
about 500. Just divide by 500 in
Yeah,
Europe, right?
Yeah. and then divide that number by 4, and that'll give you your buyback rate. And so, like for example, if your buyback rate is $15, if you can delegate any task to anybody that is willing to do it for $15, which $15 you can delegate a lot of things to for $15. You could delegate a lot for less than $10. You'll probably be looking overseas, but like there's a lot of admin stuff that our clients like run into that I know that probably people under 6 figures are stuck doing. And so understand what are those things that you could like admin, get off your plate for, less $10-15 an hour, less than that, and or for below your buyback rate. So I think there's a lot more things than people think that they can get off their scheduling, social media, scheduling, getting a bookkeeper, getting a cleaner to come to your house, and clean for 4 hours, and so your house is clean, so you don't have to do it. Like there's things that you can find to get off your plate that are probably will still give you back time. And then the last one would just be like any sort of system or structure. So what I mean by that is, we had a lot of meetings. Like we're a small team. We're 6 FTEs, like 6 full-time equivalents. And so like we had a lot of like, we were larger at one point and we had like department meetings. It's like, do we really need department meetings anymore? Like we're 6 people. Like what if we have like one all hands a month? I meet with my lead and then like a couple people have one-on-ones with the people that they need to meet with. And let's use these tools that we have more appropriately. And so we kind of defined like, hey, like here's when we use the tools, here's when you check in, here's how you use Slack, here's for like what, here's why there should be a meeting, here are the meetings that we now have. And we killed a bunch of meetings, at least meetings that I was able to get out of. And like, hey, do we really need to meet daily? Like we're small, like we're kind of nimble. Like why don't we meet like twice a week? And so like we killed some of that stuff, and I found a ton of free time just in that. And so, if you didn't have a team and like you're like, oh, I'm creating content every day for 2 hours, well, can you block 4 hours once a week and knock out more content in the 4 hours than you could in 1 2-hour session? Probably. And then you might have content, you might be able to do that every other week for 4 hours, and now you got time back. So I think blocking and stacking different things structurally is really helpful too, whether you have help or not.
Yeah, I think a big takeaway for me here is, regardless of what level you're at, the question of what's the best and highest use of my time and energy is always a really important question to ask, right? Whether you're at starting out or at 100K or 500K or $1 million or 2 million or 3 million, it's always the question. Now the solutions may look different if you're at 100K versus where Greg's at. The things that you can delegate may look different. Your buyback rate, so to speak, may be different, but it's still the operating question, because if you can't free up your time to focus on higher order activities, which is really what we do in business, right? Business growth, what it enables is you as the owner, founder, CEO to focus on higher order activities. So Greg's essentially, if I could characterize it this way, Greg is elevating himself from manager to leader visionary. That's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're just getting out of a bunch of management stuff and even some implementation stuff. And you're ascending to the leader visionary status role in your business, higher order work.
Yeah. And I think even part of that is like, and I don't know where this is in the process, but like we're just questioning why we've been doing things a certain way a lot more. So like, for example, we did a lot of these changes, and I have this like kind of new way in which I communicate with my number two, which has been really helpful. And 2 weeks in a row now, we both didn't have anything to put in the agenda for our quote unquote management meeting. And we're like, what are we going to talk about if we hop on this call? Like, do we even need it? And we're like, well, let's skip it this week and see if there's any problems. That came around to the next week. We skipped it again. And we're like, all right, like, well, we don't feel like there's an issue here, but maybe this is, instead of having our bi-monthly or bi-weekly, depending on how you define it, twice a month, we would meet and talk about vision. Well, why don't we just take the meeting that we used to have for an hour that was management that we don't really need anymore, turn it into 45 minutes, and we'll meet, but we'll talk about like leadership stuff. Like we'll talk about like what's on my plate this week, what can be like, what can come off of it. Am I stuck? And then any sort of like some of the leadership initiatives that we have. Is there anything we can focus on there? So now like next week, we'll have our first management meeting in the last 2-3 weeks, and we'll see how that goes. But like, we could have just kept hopping on that meeting and just talked about random stuff, but like there was no agenda. So it's like, why, like, I don't even know what to put on this meeting. And so let's just not have it. And let's see if we're dying because of it. Oh no, we're not. Actually, we're both way more productive. Like the team's like, dude, you're churning out so much stuff. Like it's insane. And I still am working less than probably 30 hours a week. And I feel great. Like I feel like I have a lot of energy. I'm working out like 4 to 5 times a week.
Now we got to mark this as explicit or beep it out or something.
Oh yeah, we can beep it out. Whatever. This is for sophisticated individuals.
No, man, I listen to my kids in the car. My kids are in the car all the time when I listen to this podcast.
Do you listen to your own podcast?
You don't?
No.
I have been, because the stuff that we've been publishing has been so old. And I'm like, oh, what were we talking about 6 months ago? I'm curious.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of like what we're doing, or what I've been doing. It's been really helpful so far.
Cool. Takeaway, folks, audit your time, audit your energy. Where's it going? Yes. Are you spending it? And I think the seasonality of your business is really important to consider here based on where you're at. Greg's deliberate decisions on where to focus are appropriate for where he is in business, and his conclusions may not be appropriate for you, but the questions are absolutely appropriate. So ask him. Cool.
I love it. All right, guys, take back your time. Enjoy yourselves.